This is the I Without the Disorder, and today I'm going to bust some myths about dissociation and dissociative identity. And this is the first part. Okay, so you definitely can experience dissociation without being traumatized, and this is sort of the most important thing when raising awareness to normalize dissociation, because it's really something that everyone experiences throughout their life. Some people more, some people less. So it's really important to understand that it's something that exists on a spectrum. And it's the same with dissociative identity. So there's this model called structural dissociation, which basically explains this and has this spectrum, this scale on which you can put the dissociation that you experience. And what I really criticize about this model is that some of the examples for what you can experience at the end of the spectrum, so really mild dissociation. Because let's remember that dissociation means to disconnect from your feelings, from your body sensations, and from your emotions. And the examples that are usually given for, the smallest amount or everyday examples of dissociation, they are usually something like daydreaming or something that's called highway trance. When you're driving and you get home safely, but you don't remember any details from getting there. And I know you can experience the same thing when you're walking. You just know the way so well that afterwards you don't remember because you really didn't need to pay attention. So the point is, this is not dissociation, because what's happening here is just that you're not paying attention to what's outside of you, to your surroundings. And this doesn't say anything at all about what's happening inside. Actually, the reason why I'm not paying attention to the outside might be because I'm having some sort of really a lot going on internally, and that doesn't mean that I'm disconnected internally. Actually, with daydreaming, what's happening is that it protects me from dissociation. It prevents dissociation, because if my surroundings are boring, I am in risk of being understimulated, and that can cause dissociation. And so to turn inward and daydream and fantasize to be stimulated is the opposite of dissociation. So I really don't understand that. But yeah, some real examples of experiencing dissociation without being traumatized. It can be anything. It can be being tired. It can be being sick, or just any sort of physical pain that you experience, or emotional pain. Just because you experience pain doesn't mean that you will be traumatized. Your body will dissociate to a certain degree, and afterwards you can be fine. You're not left with trauma necessarily just because you experience pain. The thing about trauma is that what makes the trauma is that it's overwhelming, and it's a painful, terrifying experience that is overwhelming, and you don't get any emotional support to process it. That's really the key to trauma. So if you experience pain or something scary and there are people to support you, or you have your own self-soothing that you can apply, then you won't be affected. You won't be traumatized necessarily. So there's a lot more that defines trauma than just dissociation, because that's just a defense mechanism, just like any other. So dissociation does not equal trauma. Okay, this is just total bullshit. What is rare is the knowledge of dissociative identity and the awareness about it. So this myth is really just our society expressing its own ignorance. It's just, what's happening is just that the places where counselors and psychologists and psychiatrists and other mental health professionals are trained, most of them don't even teach their students about childhood trauma. And that's sort of like a training for geologists not teaching students about rocks. Because the connection between emotional distress and trauma should be obvious in a world that made sense. But yeah, that's the really awful state of things. And you know, if even the professionals, most of the professionals don't even know about dissociative identity and complex trauma and childhood trauma in general, then how is the wider public supposed to know about this? So yeah, the truth is that there are so many people who have dissociative identity and they will never learn about it, which is a huge tragedy. So yeah, dissociative identity is definitely not rare. As I just explained, it all exists on a spectrum. So the point about dissociation also is, especially when you have childhood trauma, the goal of dissociation is to not make you aware that there is trauma. That's what it's trying to do. It's trying to protect you from something that's so overwhelming and unbearably painful. So that's why it's really hard. That's another reason why it's really hard to realize that you have dissociative identity, because you know your body is doing its best to protect you from the truth, so to speak. So it's these two reasons, you know, the ignorance of society and the goal of dissociation to not make you notice the trauma. That is why so many people don't know they have dissociative identity, and why there is this myth that it's a rare condition, when the opposite is true. It's super common. So it's all about raising awareness and normalizing it. Okay, so everyone does have parts. Having personality parts is actually the most basic human thing. There's no way to be without having parts. The difference between a person who has the I and someone who doesn't is just that someone who has the I, their personality parts are very disconnected from one another. And so it's not the question whether you have parts or not. It's just the question how well connected they are to one another inside your mind. So everyone, you know, experiences different emotions. And a lot of the time, for people who have the I, different parts represent different emotions. You know, not all of the time, not all parts, but it's a theme. Especially with young parts, you know, you can have a part that represents fear, a part that represents anger, or primarily experiences this one or two emotions. So this is all about emotional states being split off or being dissociated from one another because you were treated differently depending on the emotions that you expressed as a child. So, you know, we all know that people can appear vastly different. Everyone will be different when they're angry from what they're like when they're super happy, when they feel at peace, or when they are excited, or when they're scared, when they're sad. These are all, different emotional states make us act and look very different, and that's just the reality of life. So that is one example, and also the context. It's just always the context of parts. So when you are with your friends, you will be different from what you're like when you are with your co-workers, with your family, with your partner, with your children, with a complete stranger, with your boss, with someone who scares you, with someone who makes you laugh. That can bring out different people, and also whether you are having fun, whether you are at the beach on holiday, or whether you're working, whether you're stressed, whether you are relaxed, what you're doing. There are so many factors in our everyday life that, subtly change who we are, how we appear to other people. All of this, every context can bring out a different personality part. And then another factor is age, of course. Everyone has an inner child, that can come out, for example, when you're an adult and you're playing with children. You will be very childlike yourself. So your inner child self will come out, and it will just remind you of being a child. So then that personality part will come out, or maybe you're revisiting a scene from your childhood, or something reminds you of your childhood, holding an old toy, for example, and that can bring out your child part. And that can happen with any age, so you don't lose your past self. It's all it will remain forever a part of your personality. So all of these are examples how everyone really has personality parts. So this is where I think that everyone can definitely benefit from trying to connect to their personality parts in counseling, because I think in our society, and because everyone also has some sort of trauma, because it's a traumatic world. It's a really cruel, horrible, stressful, dangerous world, and it's not a trauma-informed world. So there's no way to go through life without some sort of trauma. No one is 100% prepared for life when they are being raised or when they grow up. So it's sort of inevitable to be traumatized. And also our society is very, very restrictive when it comes to people, to what is seen as desirable and how people behave and what parts they are allowed to have, or what emotions they are allowed to express in different situations, as different genders, as different classes, different contexts. There's so much pressure and there's so much oppression in our society. So I also think that definitely most people will have some parts that are more suppressed and other parts that they learned, maybe that learned to wear a mask. Everyone sort of wears masks. And so yeah, that's why I think it could definitely be beneficial for everyone to explore their own parts and try to connect to all of them, and just to get to know yourself, and to maybe reconnect with some parts that have been not given enough attention. Okay, this was the first part. Thank you for watching.